including my own, concussions. Sarah's 19 years old. She experienced her first concussion 5 years ago, and it was from volleyball. Since then, she's had 13 more concussions, and she's here with us today with her mom, Krista. So, Sarah, how have these concussions affected your health?
Well, ever since my first concussion, I've had, frequent migraines. I've always had, sensitivity to light, sensitivity of noise, and I got my first one 5 years ago now, and it's still something that I have today, so.
It's a lot of changes. I always associated concussions, I think most people do, with the traditional contact sports, basketball, baseball, football, hockey, those things. You got into playing volleyball?
Most people wouldn't think that. They look at the volleyball, oh my gosh, it's so soft, like little kids play with it. But when you're standing in the back line and you have a girl who has, really tall, she's really athletic, wicked serve, it's going 60 miles an hour coming straight towards you, and you hit the ball the wrong way and it hits you in your face.
Well, I asked you in part because I actually looked up the numbers of concussions in different sports. You'd be shocked.
Yeah.
Very safe-seeming sports have lots of concussions. It's not just a matter of picking one or two, and that's important to the show, everybody, because it can't just ban contact. Because if it happens, even when you're not having contact, as you're demonstrating.
Yeah.
Just to share your story, Sarah's concussions were serious enough that she had to be homeschooled her sophomore year in high school. And at one point, her doctor put her on brain rest for a month. And brain rest meant no electronics, phone, TV, iPad, no reading. She had to sleep for 18 hours a day. Sanjay, I've never ever heard of brain rest of this degree. I thought it was, sleeping a little longer than usual.
Well, obviously with Sarah, she's had a significant number of injuries to her brain, so doctors are going to change probably the amount of brain rest based on that. But brain rest, basically, you think of the brain like a muscle. If you injure a muscle, you want to give it some rest. That's what the doctors typically prescribe. We've now come around to actually thinking about the brain the same way.
So, there are two major misconceptions about concussions. The first is that boys are more likely to suffer a concussion. Sanjay, I showed an animation explaining how the muscles are an important part of this because it protects your head. But why is it that women are so much more at risk, girls in particular?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. Part of it, I think, is that we have found that the girls and women, young women, are more likely to report symptoms. That could be part of it. But also, if you look at the bodies, you look at the ability to withstand the pressures from a 60-mile-an-hour fastball or whatever it may be, because girls' necks aren't as strong, their head's going to actually move back and forth a lot more quickly. So that's part of it as well. As interestingly, neck strengthening exercises is a big recommendation now for girls to prevent concussions. You think about the head, the neck becomes equally important.
So let me bring Cheryl into this equation. Her son Luke is 13. He suffered his first concussion playing soccer and his second playing football. And Luke is scheduled to play again this fall. So Luke, what do you remember about your concussions?
I got my first concussion in soccer, and a ball was flying at my mouth, and it cut my lip open. Blood was everywhere, and I ended up getting 10 stitches. The main focus was my lip that day, but later that night, my parents said I was acting strange. I was very tired. I was dizzy. I had mood swings, and I had horrible headaches. And exposure to light made it a lot worse.
But you didn't lose consciousness when you got hit by the ball?
No, I did not lose consciousness, but I was very dizzy and I had a hard time walking.
I was going to point that out to everybody, because Sanjay, this is the second big misperception about concussions, that you can actually have one and not lose consciousness.
In fact, most concussions, you do not lose consciousness. It is a big misconception. Only about 8 to 10% of the time does someone lose consciousness. It doesn't mean you haven't had a concussion.
So Cheryl, I have to ask this question as a father, going through the same thing.
Yes.
Are you worried about Luke having more concussions?
Of course I'm worried every time he steps on a field or a court. But the reality is he's a 13-year-old boy, and if I could wrap him in bubble wrap and follow him around all day, I would, as any mother would, but that's simply not the way we live.
And Sarah, what would you say to all the parents out there about the risks of concussion?
You have to take the first one seriously. It'll just benefit you in the long run. Like it only took me a week before I got my second one. Obviously, by that time, I was not okay to do anything, and it really injured me. So,
I thank you all for sharing your stories. I know how difficult it can be at times. When we come back, my call to action and what you can do to prevent concussions. coming up later, would you know what to do if your child suffered a blow to the head?
The more tools we use, the more we communicate with one another, the easier it is to attack the problem.
Information parents need to know now. How to spot the first signs of a concussion. Coming up. I believe playing sports in high school and college helped me become the person I am today. My son Oliver also plays sports, and he loves it. When he runs off the field, sense an accomplishment, I know how he feels. I was there. But something has to be done to stop the effect of concussions we are seeing on our kids' playing fields. Harut Hagopian is here. He's a high school girls soccer coach who's made it his mission to equip players, parents, and coaches with concussion awareness. Listen, my goal today is really clear. It's to arm you with tests so coaches and parents can diagnose and treat concussions as quickly as possible. That's our best shot at making sure we don't have long-term problems. So, Harut, you have a very specific protocol that you're using with your teams for tracking concussions. How do you do it?
We start with the impact test. Before the season even begins, before we have our tryouts, the girls are all required, the girls that I coach and all the athletes at our school are required to take an impact test. It establishes a baseline of how their brains work cognitively before there's any kind of injury. And then if there is a suspected injury, the big thing they tell the coaches is they're not expecting us to be doctors. If we suspect that there's any kind of brain injury, any kind of concussion, that we send the kids back, they take the impact test again. We don't ever see the results. It's confidential medical information. We just make that information available to the parents, and the parents can take it to their medical professional and decide what to do from that point.
So I've talked to a lot of moms concerned about the fact that the coaches may not have the exact same level of awareness or worry that they do. So what happens if a mom watching right now doesn't think a coach is taking this problem seriously?
The first thing to do is it's all about communication. Ask the coach, what is your concussion protocol? If the coach doesn't have the answer to that question, find out who does. Because we are required to take the CDC online course. We're required to show that we understand what concussions are. We have the saying, if in doubt, pull them out.
So all this said and done, I think it's sort of nice if you can validate it on your own at home. So my medical unit called all these neurologists who are experts in this area, and they found another test to use called the King-Devick test. Like the impact test that you use, it can help determine whether players should be removed from games. But here's an advantage. The test can be done immediately on the sidelines after a suspected injury. It can be done at home as well. And here's how it works. So I've got the test in front of me. You're going to see it on the screen behind me. Let's pretend that I'm playing in high school football again, and I need to figure out if I'm okay. I will take a baseline test. Now look at the numbers. They're very simple in the beginning. See, it says 2, 5, 8, 0, 7, 3. See, I'm reading across now. Once I take this first screen, I go to the second screen. Notice these numbers aren't connected by horizontal lines anymore. It forces your eyes to process the numbers differently. And then the third screen, because there are only 3 screens, has all these numbers bunched up in weird patterns that force you to work even harder to process it. Now, why this is important is because your eyes process so much of what's going on in the brain. It ends up being a pretty effective way of screening our brains. And concussion researchers at NYU Medical Center here in New York say it's one of the easiest tests to do, and the decision can be made right there with you. It's also very inexpensive. It's an app. So how do you ensure at the end of all this, whether I'm taking a test at home and my parents figure it out, and I think everyone should be taking a baseline test with their kids right now, today. There's no waiting on that. The baseline test happens right now. Once we have that, how do parents make sure their kids are safe?
That's an excellent diagnostic tool, and that's something that, again, goes back to communication. I think we talked about with Luke, the concussion symptoms happened after he had left the field when he had gotten home. If they have access to that test and they realize something is wrong, or even a change in behavior like his mom mentioned, contact the school immediately. So I think the more tools we use, the more we communicate with one another, the easier it is to attack the problem.
Well stated. So let me offer some final thoughts. I believe in sports. I think a lot of folks watching do as well. They build character, they teach teamwork, they instill confidence. But like all of you out there, I'm concerned about the safety of our kids. And it's our duty as parents, as coaches, as teachers to know what to look for and have the courage to take our kids off the field when playing becomes dangerous and puts their brain health at risk. You can find the impact test that Coach Harut spoke about and the KD test that I just showed you on my little iPad on droz.com. Have your kids take a test today to make sure you know if anything changes. We'll be right back.